Welcome to the Houston Area Women's Center and the dynamics of domestic and sexual violence. Interpersonal violence co-occurs and interconnects. Acts of violence do not typically occur in silos. From child abuse, trafficking, intimate partner, domestic and dating violence, and sexual violence, such acts share commonalities like abuse of power, coercive control, and non-consent. Defining domestic abuse. It is domestic violence, intimate partner violence, or family violence. It is a pattern of abusive behavior in any relationship that is used by one partner to gain or maintain power and control over another person through fear and intimidation, often including the threat or use of violence. Domestic violence also includes any actions or threats of actions that are used to influence another person. Defining sexual assault. It is any unwanted, non-consensual sexual contact against any individual by another using manipulation, pressure, tricks, coercion, or physical force. It is any act a person is forced to perform or receive that includes touching of the genitals, breasts, or buttocks. This can include rape, sodomy, touching, or oral sex where the victim is unwilling or unable to give verbal consent, including being under 17 years old, intoxicated, drugged, or unconscious. Sexual violence is most often perpetrated by someone known to the survivor, including a spouse or dating partner, and also strangers. Defining sex trafficking. It is a form of modern-day slavery, including the use of force, fraud, coercion to obtain a commercial sex act, such as prostitution or pornography. However, this is not the case if the victim survivor is under 18, that is, child sexual assault, and the use of force, fraud, or coercion are irrelevant. A substantial connection exists between domestic violence and sex trafficking and sexual violence and sex trafficking. Thoroughly intertwined with economic abuse and domestic violence, trafficking is an intersectional issue that we address via outreach, education, shelter services, and legal support. Language is power. In domestic and sexual violence work, we use the terms victim, survivor, and perpetrator deliberately. The term victim can elicit emotional connotations such as feeling harmed or attacked. The term can be seen as weak even though it is not. On the contrary, the word survivor is associated with someone who continues to function or prosper in spite of opposition, hardship, or setbacks. Not everybody is ready to say they are a survivor, however. Some will tell you they are surviving. More recently, we have seen the terms overcomer and thriver used by victim survivors as a source of strength and empowerment. It is important to pick up language that someone is expressing and use them with the term they identify with. The term perpetrator should equate accountability. At Hawk, we do not work with perpetrators. Now that we know the terminology, let's take a look at the impact of interpersonal violence. Interpersonal violence can happen to anyone. No one is immune. It happens in public and behind closed doors, including all genders and sexualities, heterosexual and same-sex couples, across ethnicities, cultures, religion, races, age, socioeconomic backgrounds. The lifetime prevalence of Americans experiencing rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner is 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men. As you can see, men are also impacted. Gender-based violence. It is violence exacted because of our gender, and women continue to be disproportionately impacted. Women ages 18 to 24 and 24 to 34 generally experience the highest rates of intimate partner violence. 3 women per day are murdered by intimate partners. Texas is the 15th in the nation in the rate of women killed by men. Alaska is ranked first. These statistics reflect family violence fatalities in Texas for 2020, Harris County with the highest number. You can see that women are disproportionately murdered by men at more than 4 times the rate. Take a look at the age range of the victims. The youngest female murdered by her male intimate partner was 14 years old. The eldest was 90. The youngest male murdered by his female partner was 25 years old, and the eldest was 53. With same-sex partners, the youngest was 22, the eldest was 66. The impact of intimate partner violence is far-reaching. Intimate partner violence can lead to homelessness. Survivors may seek a safe, temporary place to stay after fleeing in an abusive relationship. The annual economic impact in the United States is staggering, $8.3 billion a year. In Texas, 251 children lost a parent in 2019 due to interpersonal violence. 48 bystanders were killed or injured. This includes anyone other than the couple in the relationship, such as coworkers, friends, and relatives. And in 2018, 143 Texas law enforcement officers were assaulted when responding to family violence calls. We have also seen a recent uptick in on-duty deaths in officers responding to these volatile and dangerous calls. Who is a perpetrator? Anyone can be a perpetrator from all walks of life, all ages, all cultures and religions, economic groups, and genders and sexualities. Younger men are more likely to commit violence against women. Serial perpetration is common. Many perpetrators hold on to traditional gender roles, which are learned or socialized beliefs affirming violence against women. Perpetrators may be charming, affable, and claim victimhood. There are various abuse tactics perpetrators use to maintain power and control over their victims. Physical abuse includes hitting, punching, shoving, throwing, grabbing, kicking. It also consists of weapons-driven violence. Emotional psychological abuse involves trauma to the victim caused by verbal abuse, acts, threats, or coercive tactics to control, terrorize, and denigrate victims. Stalking is a pattern of behavior that would cause a reasonable person to fear for their safety and suffer substantial emotional distress. Strangulation encompasses cutting off airflow and/or blood vessels in the neck, preventing oxygen from reaching the brain. The power of controlling a victim's next breath makes strangulation a frequent tactic for abusers. After one non-fatal strangulation, an abuser is 8 times more likely to kill that partner. Traumatic brain injury is commonly associated with combat operations in the military and football injuries. However, there were approximately 61,000 TBI-related deaths in the United States in 2019. That is about 166 TBI-related deaths per day. Survivors of intimate partner violence are greatly affected. TBI can be caused by a bump, blow, or jolt to the head, as well as a penetrating injury such as a gunshot wound to the head. And finally, sexual violence, reproductive coercion, involves behaviors that a partner uses to maintain power control in a relationship that are related to reproductive health, such as explicit attempts to impregnate a partner against her wishes, controlling outcomes of a pregnancy, coercing a partner to have unprotected sex, and interfering with birth control methods. Sexual violence is any sexual act, contact or non-contact, without a person's consent. Let's take a look at a few examples. Rape is not the only type of sexual violence. It is actually one of many acts that fall under the umbrella of sexual violence, along with human trafficking, sexual harassment, voyeurism, and many more. Populations can impact and compound victims' experiences of abuse and even make them more vulnerable to violence. Notable populations include the LGBTQ community, persons with disabilities, older adults, college students, military members, communities of colors, children and adolescents, and men. A perpetrator's abuse tactics can be examined by looking at the power and control wheel. The wheel serves as a diagram of tactics that an abusive partner uses to keep their victims in a relationship. The inside of the wheel is made up of subtle, continual behaviors over time like emotional abuse, isolation, using the children as weapons, threats, and economic abuse, to name a few. The outer ring represents physical and sexual violence. Abusive actions like those depicted in the outer ring often reinforce the regular use of other, more subtle methods found in the inner ring. Abuse tactics impact a victim survivor's sense of self-worth, safety and security, role as a partner parent, connection to others, including children, family members, friends, neighbors, and colleagues, and the overall ability to function due to fear and stress. The only person responsible for violence against someone is the perpetrator. Responsibility should not be placed on survivors. Consent is not the absence of no, it is the continuous presence of yes. Silence does not equate consent. Consent can be verbal, although not in every case. Be aware of physical cues as well. Discuss and respect boundaries. Ensure your partner is comfortable. Promote social norms that protect against violence, and model respect for others. This graphic depicts what happens when we experience threats. When you are presented with a threat, your body releases stress hormones. This is an effort to keep you safe. Your brain takes over and responds to the stress. The flight, fight, freeze response is your body's natural reaction to danger. It is a type of stress response that helps you to react to perceived threats like an oncoming car or being attacked. Specifically, flight or fight is an active defense response where you fight or flee. Your heart rate gets faster, which increases oxygen flow to your major muscles. Your pain perception drops and your hearing sharpens. These changes help you to act appropriately and rapidly. Freezing is a flight or fight on hold when you further prepare to protect yourself. It involves similar physiological changes, but instead, you stay completely still and get ready for the next move. Flight, fight, freeze isn't a conscious decision. It's an automatic reaction. Therefore, you cannot control it. A one-time event is considered acute. Trauma that occurs over and over is considered chronic. Chronic stress can lead to trauma, which has physical, mental, and/or behavioral impacts. A few examples of psychological effects are depression, generalized anxiety, attempted or completed suicide, diminished interest or avoidance of sex, low self-esteem, self-blame, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Common behavioral reactions include becoming withdrawn or isolated from others, becoming easily startled, avoiding places or situations, becoming confrontational and aggressive, changes in eating habits, loss or gain in weight, restlessness, or increase or decrease in sexual activity. Why don't they just leave? It is a common question asked. There are numerous barriers to a victim survivor leaving, many of which are listed here. Children, economic constraints, isolation, communications barriers, and fear of retaliation or harm, to name a few. Remember that these things may not happen every day and do not materialize overnight. Abusive behavior can creep up without the victim survivor noticing immediately. No one signs up to be abused when they start a relationship, and no one deserves to be treated this way. Leaving is the most dangerous time. It's due in part to the perpetrator losing power and control. 45% of victims had taken steps to end their relationship immediately before they were killed. 67% of all victims were killed in their homes. Furthermore, victim survivors leave and return to their abuser an average of 7 times before leaving permanently. Thank you for taking the time to learn about the dynamics of domestic and sexual violence. We encourage you to learn more by visiting our social media pages or at hawc.org.